Now, jumping back to controls, are there any gaps in any basic controls?
Yeah, so we talked about, one example that pops right to the kind of center of mind for me is we talked about unified threat management gateways or next gen AV or next gen firewall solutions. I'm sorry, and one of the things that I think we tend to deploy these things, and then our end users are browsing the internet, and they're a lot of what they're doing. I think recent estimates was like 75% of web traffic is SSL encrypted. And I was also reading a report recently that as much as a third of all malware and exploit kits that drop on end user machines use SSL. So if you have this unified threat management gateway or this next gen firewall, and you're not in some way have visibility into that SSL session, I think that control might be giving you a false sense of security. You really should look at you should find a way to look into that traffic, whether it be a proxy or so the native SSL inspection capability of the UTM. Like your end users are, if you're not doing that, your end users are definitely you're missing stuff. There's stuff getting in through that vehicle. So that's a common gap. We talked, I talked a little bit about antivirus, and it's not 100% effective. Generally, antivirus is really good at detecting the things that got created a day or two ago. So, definitely, if you have antivirus, you should be doing daily full scans, as much as you can, as deep a scan as you can do without impacting end user performance. Because a lot of times what that'll do is it'll help you realize, oh, there's some threat that dropped on this machine 2 days ago, because these actors are constantly iterating on the malware to try and evade these controls, and it takes the vendors of the traditional AV side a bit longer to catch up to it. So there's that, and we talked about the processes. All of those processes that are basic, they're all subject to human error, right? Not our end users. Our end users have human error, and they click on things. But like as an IT administrator, sometimes we might omit to upgrade patch a server, or we might neglect to put a firewall rule in to prevent access to a certain service that maybe shouldn't be internet facing. Like we're subject to human error too. So I think you definitely, when you're looking at your controls program, you also have to have a critical eye to like what's the effectiveness of this control. And again, if you go back to that threat model or that MITRE ATT&CK framework, and you're really understanding how the threat impacts the system and how it makes its way into that system and what the vehicle is, as you're looking at your controls, you like that understanding mapped onto your understanding of your control and how it's deployed. That really helps you start to identify the gap.
Now, is there an emerging control that helps fill those common gaps?
There is, but I think, again, it should be a product of the assessment that an MSP does. So, we talked about MITRE ATT&CK framework, we talked about NIST and other types of frameworks that you can use to map your controls onto. There's another framework that I generally like to do when I think about filling in those gaps with an advanced control, and it's called the Lockheed Martin Cyberkill chain. What you do is you take that understanding you got from your threat model and from the MITRE ATT&CK framework about threats, and the kill chain lets you know, it's really an analysis of what is each step in the process of that attacker entering an environment, and at each step, what control do I have to prevent, detect, or recover from that threat entering the environment. And generally, with that type of analysis, you'll find that maybe step 3 and 4, you have a gap, and that's where you can find or identify another maybe potential emerging or advanced control. And what a lot of people are finding is that one of these gaps is really once the threat enters the environment, gets past your UTM, maybe because you weren't inspecting SSL. Antivirus doesn't know about it because it's a threat that has just morphed, or it's some sort of brand new threat. Gets on the end user workstation. Maybe I'm fully patched, but again, maybe that has nothing to do with the patch state. It has to do with the configuration state of the machine. Now you're kind of in this situation where you need something else, and that's usually where if all those other basic controls had failed, that's where this new emerging control called endpoint detection and response comes in. A lot of these technologies have been around for the past few years, but I think they're really starting to finally come into maturity. And really what these solutions do is they identify changes in system state. So for instance, if I browse the web and all of a sudden an executable gets downloaded into my IE temp directory, and then that executable downloads 15 other executables in the same directory, that would be weird. And a control like this, typical antivirus might not catch that because it's looking at information about the initial file or the initial executable that dropped, and if it doesn't pattern match that, it's not going to prevent the following steps from taking place. Right. Whereas with the EDR, it's like I don't really care about signatures of things or file hashes of things or the first 100 bytes of something looks like. I care about what that thing does because I'm going to look at the things that does and match a pattern. And if it matches that pattern, I'm going to raise that as suspicious, and then you can go and you can confirm, yes, this is actually some type of threat that has bypassed all of my other controls, and now I have the ability to act on that and at least know that it's happening, and in some cases, depending on the control or how you have it configured, actually prevent that execution. So definitely, I think once you've gotten your basic controls program in place, looking at something like EDR makes a lot of sense.
Ryan, thank you again for joining us and giving us an insight into processes, control, and the framework.
No problem.